Down here, so please come and join us down here. They want me to just hi, my name is Jim Pollard. I'm a long-time former Nation journalist and a club committee man. We've had a big week. There was a big event last night about Cambodia. Tomorrow night we've got a new members night. Next week there's a couple of interesting things. On Monday they're going to talk about Thailand's Cyber Security Act. That should be interesting and a little bit troubling probably. On Tuesday night we normally have the documentaries on a Monday night, but next week it's Tuesday and it's quite a good one. Coriambara, they shoot Indians, don't they? This is about deforestation in Brazil, which has suddenly become a very troubling issue. Thursday next week we have a tango night. I'm not sure how many of you are going to get into that, but tango lessons from 7:15 to 8 p.m, followed by a tango party till late. So, Rog, you'll be into that, will you?
Definitely.
Thank you. And Friday next week, there's going to be a sing-along. It's been a while since we've had one of those. We've got a mini piano there where we're going to have... this is sponsored by Freeland, and they're going to have a fellow called Tim Johnson on piano, and everyone's going to have a bit of a sing-along. So that's next week. But anyway, now I want to introduce to you the 3 old soy dogs. I don't know whether 4 old soy dogs.
No, there's only 3.
You could say 5. I don't know whether I qualify, but okay. At the far end, we've got Roger Crutchley, who is. How many years did you have at the Bangkok Post?
100. It feels like 100.
Yes. Okay. Roger's launched his book here at the club a year ago. May the 9th. Anyway, he's your book, The Long and Winding Road to Nakhon Nowhere. That's going okay?
Yeah, it's sold a couple of books, I think.
Okay. Well, if people want an autograph, you can get one from Roger and the others. In the red T-shirt, we have Colin Cotterill, who was just saying that he's written nearly 20 books, and some of them are very bloody good. I'll say this: he got a very good write-up in the New York Times, Thomas Fuller, a few years ago, and which actually delighted me because Colin is a fantastic writer, I think. Very funny dialogue. So, but you've just had a tour of the US, and I presume you're going to tell us a little bit about that, are you? Or?
Not at all, no.
Not okay. Throw some questions at him. You see, you can find out about this. This is an open session. We've also got John Prichard, and John is... it's very timely having him here now because being a rugby man, we've got the Rugby World Cup starting tomorrow night. Yeah. And his book is... you got one and a second on the way.
Just one, and I'm trying to make sure my editor survives.
Okay. And your publisher is here.
Indeed, Danny.
Okay. Now, Danny, you want to say a few words as well?
Yes, thanks, Jim. There should have been 4 old soy dogs here. Unfortunately, one of them, Duncan Stern, died a few months ago in Pattaya, and I've published 6 books just recently that have gone into Asia Books, and 2 of them were from Duncan. I'm not an old soy dog because I'm neither old nor a soy dog. I'm more of a Peter Pan. But we've run this evening with me asking questions from the authors because they didn't want to write anything themselves. And if they start to dry up a bit, I hear that beer makes them speak more. So you can just send a beer up to them to help them out. Afterwards, we'll open it up to anyone asking questions, Jim.
Yeah.
I'm just going to repeat a little bit of what Jim's already said. Colin Cotterill is the author of the very successful New York published Dr. Siri series, crime series, about the only post-revolution coroner in Laos. He's wrote other novels set in the region, some of which were published by Asia Books and more recently by myself. John Prichard is the ex-captain of the Bangkok British Club rugby team during their most successful period. His book, which is only the first volume of the full story, breaks that sacred rule, which is what goes on a rugby tour stays on tour. This is really men behaving badly, you know, so you have to read the book to find out. I'm not sure if he has to have a bodyguard now for people that he's docked in for what they did on tours. Have you got a bodyguard?
No, but
But you're thinking about
I'm
it.
thinking about it.
And Roger Crutchley needs no introductions because he's been here longer than all of us, and many of us, the first article we'll read on a Sunday in the Bangkok Post is Crutch's column. It doesn't look like Roger's going to stop anytime soon, which is good because we can keep on reading it. If you have any questions on sport or rock and roll music, you aim them at Roger because he knows everything on that, you know. Sort of, anyway. I'm just going to speak a little bit about the missing old soy dog. Two of the books published that we've just published recently are history books by my friend and editor Duncan Stern. He was a freelance journalist from New South Wales. He died far too young, but it was a long battle with cancer. When I first met him, he was working for the Pattaya Mao as their, among other roles, as their nightlife correspondent, which made me jealous. If he had managed to make it here tonight, I was going to say there was two people, it would have made two people on the panel that had judged go-go contests, which has always been my aim in life. But Roger says he never did. He just did wet T-shirt contests, so there would have only been one. Duncan wrote for the Australian magazine, the Sydney Daily Telegraph, Turf Monthly, The Nation, the Journal of the Siam Society, and probably all of the Pattaya publications. He was a successful editor of the Pattaya Trader magazine when it was at its best. He wrote 10 books, mostly on his favourite subjects, which were history and Australian horse and dog racing. I'm going to concentrate on the two history books which we have here, although for any Australian journalist, I've bought a few copies of his book on Bernborough, which he felt was the greatest Australian racehorse, even greater than Farlap. If anyone thought there was room for another movie on an Australian racehorse, they could do far worse than base it on this book with a backstory, including mafia and suspect characters. Duncan's meticulous research was well suited to his passion for world and particularly Thai history. The two books on sale here are slices of Thai history, from the curious and controversial to the heroic and hardy, and the Thailand timeline, 1500 to 2015, and they show how meticulous he really was. The first small book is packed with 35 chapters. You will find bits of history which tend to get lost in popular thinking, such as Thailand's first Prime Minister, British troops in Thailand to help in the fight against communism, the 1947 coup, and how come all the tailor shops in Thailand had photos hanging showing a giant naga fish supposedly captured by the GIs in the Mekong. I think everybody remembers those pictures, and you can find out what it really was. For those that like reading local history, Thai history, and those writing about it, these books really should be in your library. The large Thailand timeline chronology is really quite important for anybody writing about Thailand. It's a reference book, and it's fun just to open it anywhere in the giant volume that it's in and just pick up bits at random. I doubt it's ever been matched as an English language chronology. And if there was ever a new chronology, it would probably be based on what Duncan had already done. For a journalist, it's extremely well indexed, because I was involved in the indexing. A claim could be made that it was slightly over-indexed, but I did get carried away on it. So please check out Duncan's books when you leave. They're up on the back there. The chronology is a fantastic book, you know, even without the index, you know. So I'm just going to ask some simple questions and let these guys get carried away. Are we all ready? Have we got enough beer here? Yeah. So the first one for all of you is, when and why did you first come to Thailand, and what were your early impressions? Who wants to start? Should be Roger, because he's been here longest.
Okay. Well, the problem for me is that the whole thing was a big mistake. I never intended to come to Thailand. As some of you would know, I travelled overland from England in 1969. And my aim was, I travelled on an old bus, and which was scheduled to get to New Delhi, and from there I was going to head down and try and get to Australia. That was the plan. But as I've been living in Thailand for the last 50 years, it suggests my planning wasn't all that hot. What happened on the trip, I'll cut short the overland side of it, but the bus broke down in the Afghan desert, and we had to make our own way after that. And because we'd been sleeping on the bus, when we were on the bus, we didn't have to pay for accommodation or anything. But from the time that we were on our own, of course, we had to spend money on hotels and things. So by the time we got to Calcutta, we were broke, and we just had enough money to buy a ticket from Calcutta to Bangkok. I'm talking about 1969, and I actually arrived in Thailand on April 9th, 1969. Because none of us had planned to come to Thailand, we didn't know anything about the place at all. So we stayed, our plane arrived late at night at Don Mueang, and so we, rather than traipse around Bangkok in the dark, not knowing where to go, we spent the night at the restaurant in Don Mueang, just hanging around. And we finally, we'd heard of the place to go. It was called the Thai Son Greet, which was like the backpackers' headquarters at that time, a bit like Khao San is now. And we headed down there in the morning, and the place was full up. So we were absolutely exhausted, but we had to find new accommodation. So I was appointed, myself and one of the girls that was fellow travellers, to go and look for new accommodation. So it was boiling hot, and we traipsed around Chinatown looking for somewhere to stay. And there was no English sign language there at all. Everything was Thai and Chinese. Eventually we found this, what looked promising, and we went up some stairs. And at the top there was this little old fellow who looked a bit like, well, not looked a bit like, he was a spitting image of Ho Chi Minh. And he had this abacus on his desk, and he smiled, he's delighted to see us. And but he couldn't speak any English, and we couldn't speak any Thai. So there's sort of a crowd started to gather, and I noticed down the corridor all these doors opening, and some rather scantily clad young ladies were looking out to see what was going on. And I began to wonder what we'd walked into. And so we were trying to discuss how much to pay for a room. And then the fellow, Ho Chi Minh, he said to me something what sounded like showtime. I couldn't, showtime? Showtime. And that was the only English he appeared to know. And then I worked it out. What he was actually saying was short time. And he thought me and the American girl I was with had come in for a quickie. And he wanted to know whether we would just wanted it for an hour or the rest of the night. Anyway, by that time, a big crowd had gathered, and everyone is jabbering away, and we couldn't understand at all what was going on, so we fled the scene, actually. I'll just round it off. We did eventually find a very small place. Actually, it is a very ordinary sort of, it was 20 baht a night opposite the Hua Lamphong railway station. And it was very basic, very, very basic. And too basic for our girlfriends who were with us. And the next morning they all announced they were on the next plane to Australia. And that left me and my friend, Clarence, who was my mate, that left us there. So anyway, that was it. My first few hours in Bangkok involved a visit to the short-time hotel. I hate to admit.
And that's why you stayed?
You might have something there.
Possibly.
So, somebody...
So, Colin.
Good evening. Thank you for coming, staying. You're probably wondering, why is that young fellow sitting up there on the panel with these old geezers? And looks can be very deceiving, because I first visited Bangkok in 1976. And no, I wasn't 5 years old. I'd been on a kibbutz, and I'd befriended a couple of Australians, and they came back to England with me to save up the money to go back to Australia. And I said, well, actually, I haven't got any big plans for the next 50 years, so I'll stay with you and save up the money, and we can go to Australia together. But one of the main topics of conversation from the two Aussies was about a place called Pattaya. And they said that Pattaya was a pristine, beautiful area in Thailand with dirt roads and beautiful sea, unspoiled beaches with no people. And their main concern was that there were thousands of women who had no idea what to do with their lives, because the GIs had all gone back to America the year before. And they had stopped in Pattaya on their way to Europe, and they were going to stop again on their way back. We saved the money, we came to Thailand. I had been in a relationship in England, obviously the type of relationship that makes you want to go to the other side of the world. But my friends were doing something that I didn't really think was particularly interesting. So they jumped on the first bus to Pattaya. I walked around the bus station, and the first bus that was leaving was the one going to Chiang Mai. 2 days later, I arrived in Chiang Mai. Chiang Mai was my Eden. It was the perfect place. It was friendly, it was unpolluted, everybody was nice to you, there were no cars, and I would ride my bicycle out to the university through rice fields, and I promised myself that one day I would come back and live in Chiang Mai. And I returned to Bangkok. The two Australians and I arrived in Sydney, and I guess the postscript to this story is that I arrived with fond memories of Chiang Mai and desire to go back to Chiang Mai. They arrived with venereal diseases that they'd picked up in Pattaya.
American diseases, presumably.
Come on, John.
So a decent, clean story coming from a rugby player then. Short time in Pattaya. Thank you very much. So my history really is construction, a building or project manager back in England. And in 1990, we were refurbishing, or indeed the year before, the Palm House in Kew Gardens. So an enormous old glass Victorian structure that none of us had got any experience in at all. But while I was there, the quantity surveyor on the job had just come back from working in Hong Kong. And he knew that his boss needed an assistant project manager. So they said, right, why don't you apply and go out and work in Hong Kong? So I'd been married and I'd just got 3-year-old twins and a new son. I thought, well, I've always wanted to work overseas in the construction industry. But the key places were Africa, which had dried up, and then the Middle East started and stopped. So it was a bit of an option, and to go somewhere like Hong Kong sounded very pleasing. Got on the plane, flew there for a sort of initial interview, and the guy said, yeah, no, absolutely marvellous, come here, sign the deal, come back in 3 months, and you'll be working for us. But actually, you're not going to be working in Hong Kong. You're going to be working very close to that short-time hotel in Phuket, in Thailand. Well, I'd done A-level geography, and to me, Thailand didn't exist, but Siam did. And I'd been watching a bit of TV, and all I could think of, sadly, for Thailand, was the TV Tenko series, where they got the Japanese lady prisoners of war in bamboo huts. And all I could think of was, have they actually discovered concrete yet, or am I building in bamboo? But I did. I flew to Hong Kong and then landed here, and that really was my start for a 2-year contract, and I never left. So sort of construction was very difficult in those days, because being project managers, the Thai owners of buildings or people who wanted any structures had no clue, as indeed most people don't today, about what project managers do to structure and organise what should be a very competitive bid. But it was all structured around who knew who from the Architects Association. So it took us a long time to get across the value of our input, and I'm still here today, currently out of a job, of course. So I'm writing a book. So I think that's really it for me. Came for construction in Hong Kong, ended up here, and over the period of time being connected to rugby, I'm advised that I do now understand about short-term hotels. I've played rugby in Chiang Mai. There's quite a few there, actually, just near the university, and everywhere else around the region. So my exposure around Asia was not construction, sadly, a little bit maybe in Vietnam, but my rugby experience, and hence my book, is all about the tours and the people that we met and the places we went. So it was a fabulous new era, because when I left England, my knees had had enough rugby and the cold weather, and there was no more. And I came here when I was 32, and I just really wasn't hobbling anywhere. And the hot weather improved my knees. I then played rugby for another 20 years, all around here. So as you mentioned earlier, what goes on tour stays on tour until I've written about it. So writing was not what I should be doing. I should be building buildings. But short stories without having to think of a plot is actually, depending if people find it boring to read it, is actually very, very easy if you're just regurgitating a sort of pub story with, you know, elements to it that probably shouldn't be printed.
Okay. Question for Colin. So you came up with the title of Old Soy Dogs, but you do have an interest in canines in Thailand, don't you? You do things with dogs, not anything bad, you know.
How do I follow that? Yeah, we have a project in where I live in Chumpon, which for those of you who don't travel is halfway down the country. It's a place that nobody goes to, nobody stops in, so it's probably why I chose to live there. But we have a dog spaying project, and we've spayed in the last year 300 dogs, and we have, thank you, and we have 10 dogs at home that take over the house. So you don't send me any more dogs. We have enough dogs. I've decided to ignore most of the questions that Danny asked because he keeps asking questions that I didn't put on my list. So what I want to do now is tie in the dog situation with how I first started to learn Thai. I did carry around a little notebook around before the days of having a cell phone. I carried a little notebook and wrote down new vocabulary. When I came back to Thailand, I was in the south, in Hat Yai, and I remember very well the first 4 words that I learned in Thai were Farang, for obvious reasons, Kamoy, for obvious reasons, Ahan, and Ma. So they were, for those of you who don't speak, they were Farang, which is foreigner, Kamoy, which is steal, Ahan, which is food, and Ma is dog. So the 4th word that I learned in Thai was dog. And that was because I used to ride around on my bicycle and feed the stray dogs around the streets. And there was one dog that lived in front of the grocery store near the university. And I went to the store and I put down the dry food on the step of the store. And the dog looked at the food and looked at me and stood up and turned around, showed me his ass, and laid down, ignoring the food completely. And I thought, you ungrateful little bastard, for what I've done for you. So I was picking up the food and putting it back in my bag when a little boy and her mother came out of the store, and the little boy looked at me and said, Farang, Kamoy, Ahan, Ma. So all through his life, that little boy was thinking, these foreigners, they come to our country and they steal dog food off of the streets. It's probably affected the poor little fellow for the whole of his life. So those are the first 4 words that I learned in Thai.
Right, I'm going to cross out the question about how you learnt Thai, Colin.
Sorry.
Roger, I did mention that you were a judge at a wet T-shirt contest. How did that happen?
Oh dear.
None of these questions were set up, you see. I'd
rather not talk about that. I've been in England. I just arrived back and I phoned the office to see when I started work again, and whoever's there took the call, said, oh, you don't have to work till the Monday, and by the way, you're a judge in a wet T-shirt contest in Pattaya. And within 24 hours of saying goodbye to mum and dad and that at home, there I was sitting in this Pattaya bar judging a wet T-shirt contest. So that was a little bit of culture shock involved there. I won't go into details about it, but I do remember they gave us this ridiculous long list of attributes for each contestant. You know, what their face, their clothes, style, and stuff like that. But wet t-shirt contest, people only sort of look at one area, and I remember one of the other judges was Bernard Trink, who you may have heard of, and Bernard, lovely guy, Bernard, and we noticed in the end this girl won it, and actually I wasn't going to talk about this, so I think I better not finish it off, except that the girl with the biggest ears won, and apparently Bernard has voted for her every time. So
What does anybody know what Bernard is doing these days? Has anybody seen Bernard? Bernard is probably the most famous figure.
Bernard Trink wrote, was it Night Owl column in the Bangkok Post for 30 years, which was fairly blunt in terms. He had a sort of a sign language within the column. It was when they set up the internet on the Bangkok Post. It was the most famous. Someone was check. Maybe you can confirm this, Roger. I think when they checked what's getting the most page views, there were people from all over the world clicking on to just read Night Owl, which is basically describing what's going on in Bangkok in great detail.
yeah, sorry, no, I was just confirming about Bernard. Unfortunately, I haven't seen Bernard for a year or so now, but he still writes the book reviews in the Bangkok Post, so he's still ticking over okay. As you were saying about the his column was very popular, except no one admitted it. It was the most widely read column probably in the paper, but because when we entered this era of PC and stuff like that, it became a bit rather tricky, and he was rather unfortunate in that respect. But he certainly was widely read all around the world.
And Roger, you probably remember the Bangkok World when it wasn't just Bernard's articles, it was also accompanied by photographs of his favourite go-go dancers of the week.
Yeah, that's right.
It was the Friday edition, lunchtime edition. Not that I know these things.
Yeah, well, I don't think we should talk any more about Bernard. It's better if he is here talking about it himself.
In truth, you see, more interested in the photos. But I did say to Danny, well, how can we possibly expose my daft rugby book, because it's not very clever stuff? And Danny said, oh, we could ask Bernard Trink. He might do a bit of a book, write up on it. And so we merrily posted one off to him. And I think normally he at least has the civil behaviour of replying, saying, no, I haven't got time or whatever, but he didn't even send it back. There's no comment, it went straight in the bin, I think.
John, I don't think he understood the title.
Oh, right. No, indeed.
I was at the cinema one day, and I have no idea what I'd done to deserve such bad treatment, but this couple came to sit next to me, and the guy was telling his wife what was happening in the movie throughout the movie. And it was Bernard Trink and his wife, and she could speak English really well, and he wasn't translating, he was just explaining what was happening to his wife loudly in the middle of the cinema in the evening, the crowded cinema. And I didn't know whether to nudge him and tell him to shut up, because he was Bernard Trink, he's the film expert, and who am I to nudge him? But eventually somebody behind him threw popcorn over his head, hit him right in the back of the head, and he shut up. It was perfect.
Oh dear.
Oh, there's a question.
Okay. Oh.
Can you identify yourself, please? Just what part of planet Earth?
My name is Mira Kim, was born in North Korea. Well, Roger, I mean, I have always been feeling grateful because you happen to be my elder child's boss at the Bangkok Post. Now I would like to know how many times have you been on the front page of the Bangkok Post? Because I remember one, the football game between Korea and Thailand. Have you been there more than that?
How many times I've been on the front page?
Yeah, have you written front page stories?
I had the first time I made a front page was a story when I was hunted a ghost in Bangkok. I don't know whether it's a bit of a long story, but that I'll keep it brief. There was a house in Pathum Thani, which everyone who stayed there fled because there was a ghost there, and the last lot that stayed there, they jumped into the adjacent klong because the ghost was so scary. This became a big story in the Thai newspapers. So the Post picked it up and they decided it's a good idea to send a team out to stay the night in the haunted house. But of course, none of the Thai reporters wanted to spend the night in that haunted house. So I volunteered just to get the night off work. And so I went out eventually we persuaded one reporter to come along. And we were with and a photographer, and we were with 2 or 3 Thai reporters from Thai language papers. Anyway, I'll try and cut it short. We spent the night at this haunted house, and it was an old lady was the ghost, and she had her portrait was in the house, and we all wide the ghost as we went in. And I was at last, and I saw all the Thais giving a why, so I thought I'd do it too, just to be on the safe side. And anyway, we spent the night there, and all that happened is we all got bitten to death by mosquitoes. But and we couldn't wait to leave, and the house was on the klong, so we were waiting on the klong side right at dawn for the first boat to come along. And as we were getting in the boat, long-tailed boat, our photographer fell in the klong. And they hauled him out. He was all right. They hauled him out, and they said, "Why did you fall in the klong?" He said, "No, I didn't fall in the klong. I was pushed in by the ghost." I said, "Yeah, okay." So anyway, we went back to the Post. It took several hours because everywhere was flooded. It was October time, and when we arrived back at the office, I walked in, and all these people came running over to us. I couldn't understand all the fuss. And apparently on the morning TV breakfast show in Thai, they'd had a story about these idiots had stayed the night in the haunted house, and how the ghost got so upset it pushed one of the cameramen into the klong. But it also added there was a Farang there too, and the ghost has put a permanent curse on that Farang.
And here you are.
And that was my first front page story.
Now, I wonder whether you have to...
I'll just finish off.
Right.
And it was almost my last. I did get a front page story when Tiger Woods came out here the first time. Yeah.
And now, I have been wondering all these years, decades, have you eaten som tam? You know the story of this som tam lady?
Yeah, I think, Mia, could you ask wait till later to ask the questions because we've got a few things to get through. Yeah. Okay?
Thank you.
Yeah.
You want to give us a quick, short answer on that? Was a Somtum lady featured in your column?
The sometime lady, oh yeah, who I call MS Yasaton. Yeah, I mean, no, I go on for hours talking about that. So
Okay.
I think we should move on.
Okay.
What, Roger's talking too much? Yeah, I know.
Danny, do you want to go on?
Yeah, I miss John. Oh, he's back with us.
Sorry.
So, John, you're the rugby expert here. What insight have you got on the World Cup coming up in Japan?
England, of course, England.
Are you going?
Yeah, we're going to go and watch England play in the pool matches, and then they go into the knockout rounds after that. And we have France and Argentina and Tonga. So I'm hoping we can beat Tonga because any good Tongan rugby player has been snatched by the All Blacks. So there aren't any left over there, or Fijians, or indeed Samoans, come to think of it. So they're all playing for New Zealand. So we should be able to beat them. And the French have been in an awful mess for years. But because we've been fighting them for 1,000 years, they always seem to perform quite well against us. So we've got to play the French, which I hope we will beat. We should do on form. And then Argentina. And they've suffered a bit in their Super 14 games and actually preparing for the Rugby World Cup. So I'm hoping we should go through that and then on to the next rounds. Anything is better than England's last performance when the World Cup was 2015 in England and we went out in the first round, which is not very impressive when you're one of the favourites. So I'm hoping this year it should be better, certainly. Yeah. But talking of newspaper and front page, one of your colleagues, in fact, I think you used to write for us as well, but I can't remember, Edward Tangaraja, an Indian gentleman. He was Indian, was he not?
Sri Lankan.
Sri Lankan, I apologise. And Ed was just a fabulous writer of old sports expressions. So even though I'd never heard of it before, I was a very influential ruggerite. And these ruggerites would take the field and beat whoever or lose this or do whatever. And Edward managed to put us, and one of the wives, the wife of the chairman, she was Dutch and she had come up with a new colour strip. We used to be red, white and blue from some sponsor, and she came up with pink and black. And if there's any colour that I absolutely really don't like in the world, it's pink. And I've been wearing a pink shirt for the last 25 years. But she came up with pink and black, and then Edward would do the summary after the match and write up, and we covered the whole back page of the Bangkok Post on a Sunday after the Saturday game. Any midweek game, we were on the back page, the whole page, 2, 3, 4 pictures and a write-up. Manchester United were on the inside, or maybe inside, 2 or 3 pages further back. You wouldn't see that today. We might get a small column in the classifieds, I suppose, but in those days, marvellous exposure all across the back page. For a pretty crappy team, actually, but James has played for us and he's worn the pink, so to speak. James Crossley Smith at the far end, standing down there. So he used to play rugby league, actually, didn't you, back at home? And so when he came over, it was a bit of a challenge to try and get him to come and play that puffy, useless southern game of rugby union. But a very effective rugby league player on the field, because it didn't matter if you had the ball or not, he was just going to hurt you. So he was a useful player. And continues, well, you're chairman of the Bangkok Bangers. Still now, yeah. So good influence at the playing team that's still here, and teaching the youngsters as well. So good influence.
Okay, one for Colin. So, Colin, you write the very successful Dr. Siri series, crime series, published in New York. You probably sell more books than any other expat writer that's here. But writing's not your first love, is it?
Right,
Is it right that drawing and cartoon...
Yeah, I'm not here as a writer today. I'm relaunching my career as an illustrator. I've seen my swan song was in San Francisco last week. My last panel, my last tour, because I'm going back to my early days in Thailand when I had a regular cartoon strip in the national newspapers, and it's a lot easier. You don't get edited quite as much by doing cartoons as you do when you're writing a book. So there's not so much pressure. It's relaxing, it's fun. You don't have to drink while you're drawing pictures. When I'm writing, I have to drink, otherwise I can't produce anything. When I'm illustrating, I can't drink because you need control of your hands to do the illustrations. So I used to have a regular cartoon strip in The Nation called Mann Farang. And Mann Farang was a Bangkok resident, expatriate, and he went through all of the problems that expatriates have in the capital. And I sent samples off to David Tuck, who was the features editor at The Nation at the time, and to my surprise, he accepted 20 cartoons and he put them in one a week. He didn't mention at the time that he wasn't going to pay for them, so it wasn't until I went to collect my money that I realized that this was a charity move on my part. I sent pictures to, and he might not remember this, I sent pictures to Roger, and he wrote back to me and said, well, actually, we don't have anything for you to illustrate. Why don't you write something and illustrate it? Do you remember this?
It's coming back.
Yeah, no, he doesn't remember yesterday. How can he remember all those years ago? So I started to write columns, features for the weekend Bangkok Post with my illustrations. And the stories were more popular than the illustrations, and that's probably what led me into being a writer. So I probably owe him a percentage of my income for the last 10 years because he was the one who forced me into the world of writing. I'm not going to give him any of it. It's just a gesture. So I'm now back in illustration. I've been doing covers for books. I did the cover for Roger's book. And the 11 years of Mann Farang in Bangkok is now together in a compendium of cartoons. And I'm available for illustrations and for anything you would care to have illustrated. And I've stopped writing, so this is my last panel.
There's also a book by a young girl. You did the cover for that too?
Young girl.
Yeah, there's one of the books in the bookcase up there with a...
Oh, yeah. I did illustrations for a children's book, a colour picture book called Snowflake and the Big Race.
I have to say, I think you did a brilliant job.
Thank you. You have to say it, or you want to say it?
Well, they told me I had to say it.
I just want to challenge you there, Colin, about this is my swan song, I'm never going again, I won't be writing anymore. In 1980, I took my girlfriend to Wembley and I paid a huge amount of money to buy 2 tickets to the Rolling Stones because it was their last concert ever. Lying, sorry ladies, bastards. And in my opinion, I think we're going to see you back here again with a few more books.
I'm not in the same league. I can't even compete with the Stones.
We should also say the cover of Roger's book was by Colin. You know, so he can turn his hand to these things, you know.
I dabble in careers, so I next year I'll be doing something completely different. Life's too short to have one career, I think.
Okay, next question. Roger, you have a story about working on the movie sets here in Thailand.
Oh, yeah. I wasn't working on the movie set, but for a period I wrote the movie reviews at the Bangkok Post, and through that I got invited by some of the Thai film producers to go and look at them making their films. And one such occasion, I went up to Chiang Mai, where they were shooting a Thai film, but they had this American starlet flown in specially from Hollywood called Lisa, and that was going to be the big attraction in the movie. And the day I arrived, they were just preparing this scene, and it was in a lovely village in Chiang Mai, and the scene called for her to be looking out of the first floor window of an old farmhouse, looking very forlorn, because she thought her husband, who was a Thai husband, had been killed in, I think it's the Vietnam War. So that was the scene. It was a very sort of scene, that weepy scene. But but it called in the script it was during a rainstorm. The one problem, of course, although it rained nearly all the time I was there, it didn't rain on that particular day, and so the natural weather didn't oblige. And being a low-budget film, they didn't have water sprinklers or anything like that, but they did have a big watering can. And so they set up this scene. Lisa, the actress, was looking out the window. They put the step ladder just below her, and this fellow from the film crew carried this watering can up to the top, to the level where she was looking out. And when they shot the scene, he poured this watering can in front of her face, and that was the storm. So, but of course, she just broke up into giggles when she saw this watering can. And it's not exactly how they did it in Hollywood. They don't use watering cans in Hollywood. So, of course, she kept breaking into giggles, and that's no good for the scene. So the fellow kept having to go back down the steps, over to the well, fill up the watering can, and go back and do the whole scene again. And she kept breaking up. She couldn't help it. And it took about five takes before they got it. And I spoke to her afterwards. She was a very, very lovely, nice lady. And she just said the whole thing was so absurd, but she just couldn't stop laughing. And when the film finally came out, and it did come out, I watched this scene closely to see how it worked, and you can see it, and she's actually it's quite good actually. She's shaking in emotion, with emotion. But what the audience didn't know, she was trying not to laugh rather than trying not to cry. Anyway, that's my little film story.
So just a general question out there. What are your fondest memories of Thailand since you've been here? Who wants to pick up on that? Someone told me to ask that question.
Well, I mean, I think probably not a memory, but the fact that after all these years, we're still here. I think that answers that question. I mean, you don't stay in a country for 20 years if you don't love it, and you don't love the people, and you don't enjoy being here. So my fondest memory is I found a place that I feel comfortable in, and I don't want to go anywhere else.
I think it's a very good answer, because I was trying to fumble through again when I came with my kids, and they all grew up here. So they came at 3 or just 18 months old, and they lived all of their the early years here at school and everything else, and then eventually had to go back to the UK to do their A-levels and then university. So there was an option to return back to the UK with them, but unluckily or luckily I'd already got divorced from that wife, and so I left them to go back and continued living here in Thailand for that very reason, Colin. I think there's nothing, you can't put it down to anything other than the sort of the wrong word, magnetism, but the food, the ambience, the people, the complete insecurity about having to have your passport with you the whole time. It's not your country. You're not actually welcome all the time by everyone. And yet, it is the most fabulous country I've been lucky enough to live in. And indeed, I would go further and say I've staggered down some very dark alleys in my time, not looking for a short-term hotel, of course, but I've staggered some dark alleys. I've imbibed too much beer and probably been incapable, and I've never felt safer in any nation, in any town, and Bangkok is seriously, it's got some grubby alleys I've been down. Safest place for my wife, my kids, me, everyone. And I think we've been very lucky to live here. So fond memories also then have that sort of invisible quality, not just the food and the people, but it's we're all really lucky that we've been very safe here.
A friend of mine once described expat life in Thailand as Stockholm syndrome, that you come for a short time, you complain about everything, but you become part of it, and you realize that you're defending it to other people as well. So you can't leave, you're stuck, but you want to be stuck.
Can I just ask a quick question, John, about, I'm just intrigued. I played touch rugby with the Southerners here for 15 years, and the fact that you could not only see, really good people from all across the world, Japanese, French, South Africans, whatever they may be, playing sport with them, just having fun, but then also being able to go on tour within the region and have a wonderful, like a weekend in could be Vientiane, Hanoi, Phnom Penh, all of these places where, this is men and women's teams from here and having a ball. Is that how it was in the rugby scene for you?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's my first book. I've never written before, and so there's elements of grubbiness that happen on rugby tour, but people have said they've actually been quite enlightening, because I can't describe anything as well as you gentlemen can, but trying to describe the places you've been and the people you've met and the locations and the geography, and be it Vientiane, be it even Cebu in the Philippines, it was Istanbul, and you've got a question coming up a little bit later. So many of my stories have also tried to paint a very quick picture of playing in those places, and then you do get exposed very quickly and very regularly, because back in the UK our tours would be at Easter. You have one tour, it was over the Easter weekend, and if you played in Ireland the pubs were shut, so that was a bit stupid. But here we had tournaments not only in Thailand, but there would be the Singapore Sevens, there would be a Manila tournament, the Hong Kong Tens, and then there would be invitations from Hanoi or somewhere. So tours, we probably went on tour, probably the result of the divorce actually, 5 times a year for a weekend, and you saw an awful lot of people and met a lot of people and met a lot of locals. You played a hard game of rugby. I mean, touch has its odd collisions as well, even though you didn't mean to. And and then rugby is then about drinking after the game and fraternising with the locals, and it's been a marvellous experience, marvellous. And so that's an extra 20 years of those, and then once you are incapable of actually taking the field, you can go along as an old git and carry on doing what you were doing earlier. Sorry.
I want to hear Roger's fondest memories from 100 years in Thailand.
Oh dear. I will endorse what you said about the living in Thailand and the Thai people, even from the very start, that very first day that I was at Hua Lumpang station, and I was pretty broke, but needed to eat or drink something, and the vendors there, they seemed so delighted when I went up to buy some fruit, and there was one vendor I remember in particular. She sold pineapple, and I got a big pineapple slice for 1 baht, and that kept me going for the next few hours. And then I'd go, every time I felt a bit dodgy, I'd go back and get another baht's worth of pineapple. But the general ambience in Thailand, it was so, I felt comfortable from the moment I arrived, which wasn't the case in some of the countries I passed through on the overland trip. But I do have I have many fond memories. One in particular, I think a lot of you know that I used to call my maid MS Yasaton. She was a lovely maid. She worked for me for 30 years. Sadly passed away about 15 years ago. But one moment I will remember is when I was 50. And I hadn't told anyone about being 50. I last celebrated my birthday when I was 40. So I kept quiet. And I was in my bedroom doing something, and there was a knock on the door, and I opened the door, and there was my maid, her husband, their son, and their niece standing there. The maid was holding this birthday cake with my name spelt in Thai on the cake, and 50 candles on the cake, and then they sang "Happy Birthday" to me, totally out of tune, of course, and it was such a lovely moment because I wasn't expecting anything like that, and they'd just done it off their own bat, and that was a very fond memory. Yeah.
If you've ever seen 50 candles on a cake, it's a bloody fire hazard, I tell you. It's like Dresden during the war or something.
Yeah, I couldn't blow them out.
Because you're too old. Stop it.
Sorry, we've got another question here. Did you want to ask a question?
What do you think of the influence of tourism on Thailand?
Tourism.
Is it good or bad?
Tourism.
What do you think of the influence of tourism on Thailand? Anyone care to get into that?
Very quickly, it obviously, back in England, back in the 90s and 80s, there were very exclusive tour holidays you could go on, and out the Far East was obviously one of them, but you had to have some pretty extensive disposable income to be able to get that far. And so I don't think there were that many people, and obviously Phuket is a great lure. To me, today, you will always have tourists, and I'm not sure they're treated as well as they should be treated, maybe, but and Pattaya is Pattaya, we all know that, but it really is Little Russia now, and I think if you go anywhere in Pattaya, you've got to be able to speak Russian or read it, really. I just...
So you think it's a critical cultural change?
Well, I've actually half answered your question, and I've also made a mistake. There's a lot of Russian tourists, but there's also a lot of Russian expats who now are resident here. And I think they brought some dubious traits with them. Before I get myself shot, over to you, gentlemen.
It's all right. The video.
Normally behind, isn't it?
Danny, please.
Okay, seems that Roger had such a lovely answer last time. I'm going to ask him, what was his favourite night spot or bar in Thailand?
Oh dear, favourite. There was plenty. You won't be surprised at hearing that. When I was first here, I loved going to the New Pepbury Road strip. There's about a mile of bars there, and they catered for the American servicemen on R&R from Vietnam. And each bar was much the same. They had a band, dance floor, and lots of hostesses. But they were really good fun and very lively places. And I'd just come out from England, And although I was obviously aware of the Vietnam War, I hadn't taken much interest in it until I started going to these bars and found myself talking to helicopter pilots who'd been shot down, and what they called grunts, the guys in the trenches, talking about how they'd been hadn't eaten things for 2 days because they were under fire from the Viet Cong, stuff like that. And so I found myself quite taken up by all this, but it was a wonderful mixture for me. It was all new, and I loved the music, and I loved the entertainment, and there's a real buzz. Everything was very spontaneous, and the Americans, of course, they were here for 7 days R&R, and they were going to enjoy every single minute of that. Half of them never went to sleep. They just partied the whole time. So that was my. I also, for some people might be interested, one of the places I used to go to was the old Mosquito Bar on down in the docks in Klong Toi, and that was the. It's quite famous in this part of the world as it was typical. As I mentioned in my book, you felt like Humphrey Bogart would walk in any moment. The overhead fans, out of tune band, hostesses who were a bit past their prime, and customers that were certainly past their prime. And most of the customers were seamen, merchant navy seamen from Eastern Europe, because they come from the ships. But so I'll just move on to Patpong, and my favourite places on Patpong: Superstar, Safari, and Mississippi Queen. And I loved the Mississippi Queen because they played really good kind of soul music and everything. And they did have a couple of twin dancers there called, somebody help me out, is it Jim and June? Anyway,
I think that was right.
I'm sure there's someone in the audience knows their names. But the Mississippi Queen actually got extra fame when they shot a scene from the big movie. What? No.
Apocalypse Now?
No, not Deer Hunter. Sorry.
Deer Hunter.
I had an elderly moment.
At least we're not dead.
Deer Hunter, and they shot a scene inside there. It was supposedly Saigon, but one of the Thai dancers, one of the go-go dancers from Patpong, Noi, was the star chatted her up in the bar, and they went off and did whatever. But anyway, she won a lot of brownie points for that, and she really went up in the pecking order in Patpong. And shortly after that, they had a Patpong Mardi Gras, and I was invited to be the judge, Danny, this is right, in a beauty contest for Miss Patpong. And so I had this lovely afternoon sitting in the middle of Patpong, drinking beer and watching lots of lovely ladies walk up and down. And one of the contestants was Noi of Deer Hunter fame. And no guessing to who won the Miss Patpong title. There we are.
So Noi was actually an outtake as opposed to being taken out of that part.
Yes, good.
It's a film thing.
Good technical point.
Good technical point.
Anyone else?
Anybody else got a favourite?
Well, again, when I first came in '91, Safari seemed to be that we had our sponsor was Goldfinger down at the end of it, and they sponsored the British club to play and provide the shirts and things. And our favourite bar was Safari Bar, and I think Thai Bar next door. We were trickling there, but Safari Bar was very revolutionary for us because and many of the other bars, all the girls were wearing bikinis, two-piece bikinis, but in Safari Bar they weren't. They were only wearing a one-piece bikini and a couple of stickers. And so that was really quite rewarding, and we went in there mainly for the music, of course.
It's the same nowadays.
Is it still the same? I've been in for ages. Well, actually, I walked past Pet Pong the other day, and by then we had finished doing our training there, and we moved to Cowboy was our bar, and Long Gun, the lady there, sponsored the British Club for 15 years. Loads of cash, just loads and loads of input. On the basis that, of course, we would then encourage young Thai lads to come and play rugby. And they went on tour with us, so we were able to give it a good, honest reason why we needed the money. And it was spent, thank you very much, it was spent on the young Thai lads. But I did have a young chap come to me very early on, one of the Thais, and said, look, I really, really want to go to Hong Kong, but I haven't got any money. Okay. And he was a very good player. And I said, all right, I'll sponsor you to go to Hong Kong. That is not a mean trip. That is a hotel room. It's a flight. That's a shed full of beers, because he drank beer, and anything else may happen. So I took him to Hong Kong, and we played the long tournament. So we played on the Wednesday and Thursday. Then you watch the sevens. There was an international on the Friday. Saturday, Sunday, came back on Monday. So you've actually paid for another person to go for nearly a week in one of the most expensive cities in town. And we got back to the British Club, and I said, well, look, can I give you a lift home? Yeah, because how are you going to get home? It's late at night, and it's dark and raining. No, Mum and Dad are here. Oh, here they are now. And they pulled up in the biggest gold Mercedes you've ever seen in your life. Hello, son, quick, put your bags in here. So I use other people's money.
Okay, just an open question. Embarrassing moments or run-in with the Thai law? Colin.
Yeah, not funny. We had a project in Phuket. We set up an organisation called Child Watch, and it was mainly to help foreign kids who've been trafficked to Phuket to sell chewing gum and be available for services. And there were a lot of foreigners at that time coming to Phuket, invited by resident foreigners, and tours were organised to take the kids to the islands at the weekends, etc., etc. And so we set up the organisation. I was working at the university at the time, and we set up an organisation which would get the kids off the street and try to prosecute the expatriates who were running the trafficking rings. And without exception, every time we got somebody arrested, they would go to jail and they would be released because they paid tea money to the police. And it didn't matter how big the case was, it didn't matter how much evidence we had, and this is not a funny story, but it's true. Unfortunately, we only were able to prosecute one person in the 4 years that we were running the project. So, and every time the people who were responsible paid money to the police and left. So that's my overriding memory of the police. I have not a lot of respect for Thai police, and I hope there are none in the audience tonight.
What years would that have been?
It was probably 92, 93, around then. Yeah.
It wasn't until the late 90s that Chuen Lik Pai's government passed laws against child sex. Is that right? I think.
It was. Yeah, but again, the laws and the reality were never really in cahoots with each other.
Yeah. I think.
Do you think that the Thai attitude, especially like with younger generation, it's changing over the lackadaisical.
It was, I mean, for a long
Style,
time, in Asia for a long time, it was always okay for men to be with younger girls or younger boys because there was the old Chinese theory that taking the virginity of a person made you a stronger person yourself. So for a long time, being with children wasn't considered to be a sin in Asian culture, China especially, Southeast Asia also. So it was difficult to break that habit. It was difficult to convince people that children had rights, that children couldn't be abused. And I think as the younger social workers came into the project, more word was spread in the community, and I think things have improved. It still happens, and it doesn't happen. There was a theory that it was a tourism thing, that it was foreigners and tourists who engaged local kids in sex. But actually, 80% of the problem is from locals. It's not a tourism thing. There are a lot of tourists, and the only way you can actually promote it is to put out campaigns against the tourism aspect. But in fact, traditionally, it's locals, it's Thais with Thai kids, it's Chinese with Chinese kids. So things are improving, but not much.
Sorry.
I was just asking, apart from this sexual innuendos that you have all the time, have you better memories than from Thailand? What Thailand has done to you? Apart
Yeah,
from
let's
the
have to-
sexual thing? If we could move a little bit away from it, then there are more interesting things. than
Yeah,
just the
you're right.
sexual approach, I would guess. I'm sorry, but
No, you're quite right, but there's no point in talking about my book then. But no, I'm with you. But on a slightly lighter note, I think we've all enjoyed a little bit of lackadaisical policing when you've been driving somewhere. And you may have gone through a red light you shouldn't have done, you're driving under the influence of something, and the policeman has stopped you, or it's just the end of the month and he's stopping you anyway, and you've done nothing wrong, but you're going to get a ticket for something, so there's an opportunity to maybe have 100 baht or 200 baht on your dashboard that could possibly be given to the policeman's Christmas fund. Well, in my little car that I just bought, a new car, I was driving along the expressway out towards Rangsit, and there was a sticker missing, the insurance sticker or the annual road tax sticker or something. It was missing, and I'd stopped at the toll gate, and there was a policeman on his bicycle, big bike, big official bike, and he'd got his jodhpurs on. So he'd got big formal khaki jodhpurs, and he wandered up and stop. Yes, and wound down the window, and he said, "Your sticker's missing, where's your car tax or whatever?" I said, look, it's back at home, I've just got it, it's coming. He said, okay, so well, I have to give you a ticket, okay? Really? Moan, groan. What about if I could give you an incentive not to give me a ticket? And he said, yeah, okay, and it was December. And I said, and Christmas is coming up, so, goodwill to all men. And I said, 200 baht? And he said, yeah. And because it was a new car, I'd not hidden any money anywhere, and I leant across and grabbed my wallet and brought it across towards the open window, and he's standing there, and I opened it and I looked inside, and there's only 1,000 baht note. And this copper, marvellous, in beautiful English, leant in and with real Hollywood acting, plucked my 100 baht out and said, "Merry Christmas." I asked him if I could have some change. No. So we get a bit of give and take, but on more serious notes, it's pretty poor. But I have exchanged some cash with policemen.
Yeah, I have one memory of when there weren't any police around at all. It goes back to the days of the October 14th, 1973 revolution, or whatever you call it. And apart from toppling the government, the students, protesters, burnt down the the police headquarters at Radom now. So for the next couple of weeks, there were no policemen at all on the streets of Bangkok. And that's we talked about earlier about Bangkok being a fairly safe city to live in, and I agree with that. But this is about the only time that it did feel a bit unsafe. It wasn't particularly wise to go out late at night because there were no police, there was no law. The students did their best by they looked after the traffic, and I think they set up some neighbourhood watch things, but there weren't any police. Anyway, to get to the point, I was sitting in our house on Soi 8, where Julian knows very well, and with good friend Dick Wood. And it was about 3 or 4 days after October 14th, and we were discussing the situation. And it was late at night, about 11 o'clock, and suddenly we heard down the Soi a scream, and then the shouts of "Kamoy, Kamoy, thief, thief." And then we looked out from our house and saw running past 2 young guys running past who were presumably the thieves. My initial reaction was, I don't want to get involved in this, I'll stay here. But Dick was a very different sort of character. He was only wearing a pakama, and nothing on his feet. He got up, opened the door and ran down the garden path and in pursuit of these 2 robbers. And I was trying to get him to come back, but he wouldn't. And so I followed at a good distance, and I was still just coming out of the garden, and Dick was racing down the Soi, and I heard these 2 gunshots. I thought, oh my God, Dick's called it, yeah. And I very nervously looked down the Soi to see what had happened, and much to my relief, I thought Dick was running back down. His pakama had fallen off, so he was basically indecent. And he came up to me and he said, when they started shooting at me, I thought I'd better come back. and that was we could have done with some police around then. But mind you, I think they would have probably arrested Dick for indecent exposure.
I have one happier policeman story. We were drinking, it was a temple fair, and we were drinking at the temple with a policeman off duty. And it was a temple that had wild monkeys. And we were taking a photograph. I had an old Instamatic camera, if anybody remembers those. And while we were taking the picture, a monkey came down from the tree and stole my camera and took it up to the top of the tree. And I said, well, my memories of the last 3 months are on that camera. We really need it. And the policeman said, no problem. And he left the group. And I'd actually completely forgotten because he wasn't around. And the next thing I heard was this gunshot. And the policeman had come back, shot the monkey out of the tree. The monkey had fallen down in the temple, still holding on to my Instamatic camera. And everybody looked at the policeman and they said, well, okay, good, well done, good, nice job. And I was just about to go and relieve my Instamatic camera when another monkey came down and grabbed the camera and took it up to the top of the tree, and we had to forcibly stop the policeman from shooting the whole pack.
Colin, you've had quite a long connection with Laos. Have you got any insights you could give us on visiting Laos or living there? I know you're not allowed there anymore.
Yeah, I got kicked out of Laos. This is no.
No, you don't have to.
Anybody got any questions?
Which do you class as your best books?
I think you have to start at the beginning of the series and work your way
Yeah.
through them. You can get in at any juncture, but you really need to find the characters in the first couple of books before you do that.
In what year did they kick you out?
It was 94.
And you've never been back?
No, you can go. When they kick you out of Laos, I was afraid that they wouldn't let me back in.
Right.
Because they just introduced this computer system at the airport, and I was afraid that all of that information would be on the computer and that somebody would say, this is the guy that we're not letting back in. And I arrived at the airport, and all of the computers, there were 6 computers, all with these beautiful macrame covers, unplugged. Nobody knew how to operate the computers. And the next year I went back again, and they still had the macrame covers on the computers. Nobody was operating them. So I've been back, twice a year for the last 10 years, 15 years now.
Do you have fond memories of Laos as well as?
I love Laos. I expected to be living in Laos. I thought I would stay there, and being kicked out makes a big a wandering hole as to why they could throw you out, and you never know why they throw you out. You can never get answers to questions. Yeah.
Were you working for the NGO at that
I
point?
know. I was teaching at the university, but I wasn't a very good socialist. I wasn't giving favours to the sons and daughters of the generals and the rich and famous. So I probably didn't play the game very well.
Do you still believe it's very corrupt over there? I mean, it seems to me like a staggering level of corruption that's almost unmatched anywhere in this region.
Laos is now a suburb of Beijing. The northern provinces only produce the kind of crops that can be exported directly to China. And the Chinese trucks come, pick it up, take it back across the border. Nothing's available in Laos. And the hotels and the condominiums and the building sites, all of the posters and the placards now are written only in Chinese. Not even the decency to have Lao language or English language on the signs. So I can't go back to Laos now because I have to remember Laos the way it was in the good old days. Because I don't think there are restaurants. You can go to restaurants in Laos, and the people working in the restaurant only speak Chinese. So I've become, over the years, I've become racist. I didn't realise I'd ever be racist, but I've become a grandfather now.
Someone said the other day that the one decent thing they had at least done, the one time they said no, was that Beijing asked to set up a base there, a military base, and they said no, that the Vietnamese wouldn't permit it, unlike maybe Cambodia. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to wind it up shortly. Has anyone else got questions? And if you do, quickly come up. Otherwise, we'll have a beer and get some books autographed. Any more you want to?
No, that's. I think we've done our.
Very good.
Or does anyone want to say anything? No.
Would you like to make last remarks? Any of you, please, John? Would you?
Well, I'm feeling a bit depressed now because for my 15th wife is a Lao girl, actually. I was to build a house in Laos. Made me feel suicidal. But actually, my house is quite a big thing. I wanted to build a little wooden shack in Laos, in the nature of the architecture that was there. But if you're going to marry a youngster these days, they want something in concrete. So I've actually built a concrete house, and everything other than concrete came from Thailand. So you don't actually need to go through the formal airport or even over the bridge, because every item ducked below, every item in my house ducked below the duty level, because it went across on a long-tail boat across the Mekong, picked up and taken and installed in my house, which is a phenomenal amount of labour hours, which again costs I rewarded everyone, but they were happy to have almost nothing. So I'm hoping in the south, where I am, Savannaket and Pak Se, rather than the northern China area, there's a few years left without the Chinese coming there, but yeah, lovely country to me. Yeah. Oh, and by the way, thank you very much all for coming, by the way.
Thank you for coming.
I'm very pleased to have been invited to come on the panel with people who write real books, but thank you.
Roger, any final words? We've had you here before. You can come back.
Thank you very much. No, I think I've said enough already tonight, so we'll leave it at that, I think.
Okay. And Danny?
No, I'd just like to thank the 3 old soy dogs here for...
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, if you could put your hands together for our guest tonight. Thank you very much. There's still, you can still get books there, or if you've got a book and you'd like it autographed, please come up. Thank you for coming. We'd love to see you again. Good night. Travel safe.
Okay, well done, Tim. Good job.
I must come and buy your book. I want to buy